In the year 1969, humanity reached an unprecedented milestone. A human being walked for the first time on the surface of the moon. The protagonist of this historic moment was Neil Armstrong, who, upon touching lunar soil, pronounced a phrase that was forever engraved: "One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." The entire planet celebrated. Armstrong was elevated to the status of legend, turned into a symbol of the impossible made real. However, what came afterward turned out to be as intriguing as his feat. Despite his global fame, Neil withdrew from the spotlight shortly after his return. He declined interviews, avoided public appearances, and led a life increasingly removed from the media. What could have led the first man on the moon to choose anonymity? Was it merely a personal decision, or was there something more? Over the years, theories began to circulate, some as incredible as they were unsettling. But it was toward the end of his life that the mystery deepened even further. It is said that, in his final days, Armstrong left a letter containing a shocking revelation about what he saw on the moon, a discovery that could change everything we thought we knew. Let's go back a bit. In the midst of the Cold War in 1961, President John F. Kennedy made an ambitious promise: the United States would reach the moon before the end of the decade. Thus was born the Apollo program, a monumental endeavor that mobilized scientists, engineers, and astronauts in a race against time with the Soviet Union. The path was not easy. In 1967, a tragedy shook the project. During a test of Apollo 1, a fire claimed the lives of 3 astronauts. But not even that stopped the United States. Finally, in July 1969, Apollo 11 launched with 3 brave crew members: Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. Days later, the spacecraft reached lunar orbit. It was then that Armstrong and Aldrin boarded the module Eagle and began the descent. A tense descent, full of uncertainty, in which even the landing radar was slow to respond. But finally, they made it. What happened afterward was recorded in history. But what they truly experienced up there perhaps is yet to be revealed. The Apollo 11 moon landing was not as smooth as many imagine. In the final moments of the maneuver, the lunar module veered off its initial course, approaching dangerously close to terrain filled with rocks and craters. To make matters worse, alarms began to sound one after another, creating tension in the cabin. But at the helm was Neil Armstrong, a pilot with nerves of steel and vast experience in critical situations. He had already demonstrated his composure during the Gemini mission, and this time would be no different. Without hesitation, he took manual control of the module and began to maneuver, dodging obstacles while precisely monitoring the fuel level, which was rapidly decreasing. At the last moment, when almost no fuel remained, Armstrong achieved the impossible, landing safely in the Sea of Tranquility. His message was clear and calm. "Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed." At that moment, the control center in Houston breathed a sigh of relief, and the entire world erupted in applause. Hours later, at 38 years old, clad in a spacesuit that weighed more than he did, Armstrong slowly descended the ladder of the module. And when his foot touched the surface of another world, he spoke the phrase that would resonate for generations: "This is one small step for man, but one giant leap for mankind." Before him stretched a desolate and gray landscape, silent and windless. Only his breathing and pulse echoed inside the helmet. It was a place where the solitude and grandeur of the universe became tangible. Soon, Buzz Aldrin joined the historic walk. For more than 2 hours, both astronauts worked on the lunar surface. They placed scientific instruments, collected soil samples, and planted the American flag. They even received a call from Earth congratulating them on the achievement. It is estimated that about 600 million people followed the live broadcast on television and radio. For the first time, all of humanity celebrated a conquest beyond our planet. The success of Apollo 11 not only represented an unprecedented technological advancement, it was also a demonstration of the power of the United States in the midst of the Cold War. But amid so much glory, something happened that few know. During the moonwalk, the television signal and radio communications were inexplicably interrupted for about 2 minutes. No one knows for sure what happened during that lapse. The connection resumed shortly afterward, as if nothing had occurred. What really happened during those 2 minutes of silence on the moon? Although the transmission of the moonwalk was quickly restored, that brief communications blackout, a mere 2 minutes, left more questions than answers. For decades, the reason for that interruption remained in the shadows. Over time, theories began to emerge. Some claim that, during that lapse, Neil Armstrong transmitted something completely unexpected to Houston. There is talk of strange presences, unidentified flying objects, even footprints that didn't seem human. Did Armstrong have an inexplicable encounter on the moon? Was he witness to something that was never made public? NASA has never commented on the matter, which has only fueled suspicions and kept the mystery alive. However, beyond theories and official silence, there is an undeniable truth. Armstrong's journey was not only a technical achievement, it was a transcendental leap for humanity. For the first time, the ancestral dream of reaching beyond the sky became reality. Armstrong didn't just step on the moon, he opened the path to the stars. But his composure and ability to remain calm didn't come out of nowhere. Throughout his career, Armstrong faced extreme situations. In 1966, during the Gemini 8 mission, he took control of a spacecraft that was spinning violently out of control, saving his life and that of his crewmate. 2 years later, while testing an experimental lunar landing module, the vehicle suddenly failed. Armstrong ejected at the last second, escaping certain death. Those critical moments proved that he had what it took to lead the most important mission in history. For his colleagues, there was no doubt. He was the right man. The mission concluded successfully, and with it, Armstrong, Aldrin, and Collins began their return to the planet. The capsule landed without incident in the Pacific Ocean. But before reuniting with the world, the 3 astronauts were placed in quarantine as a precautionary measure against possible lunar contaminants. After 3 weeks of isolation, they emerged into the world as heroes. In New York, they were welcomed by a crowd that packed the streets of Manhattan. Later, they embarked on a world tour. Leaders of all nations wanted to shake their hands. For millions of people, they were the living representatives of the greatest feat ever accomplished by humanity. Neil Armstrong, overnight, became a legend. But among the applause and medals, that pause will always remain. That brief moment of silence on the moon that no one has fully explained. What did Neil Armstrong really see up there? Maybe we'll never know. Behind the applause and worldwide recognition, there was something that didn't quite fit. During the first press conference after his return, many noticed a subtle but unsettling detail. Neil Armstrong didn't seem like the typical victorious hero. His expression was restrained, his demeanor reserved. He responded calmly, almost coldly, as if he carried something inside that he couldn't share. Far from showing euphoria, Armstrong seemed worried. That lack of emotion puzzled some of the journalists present, and over time, more people began to wonder. Were the astronauts hiding something? Of course, many attributed it simply to his personality. Armstrong was never a man of many words. He was always reserved, discreet. But for others, his behavior raised suspicions. In the days and months that followed, Armstrong's public presence began to fade. Little by little, he distanced himself from the media spotlight. He declined interviews, avoided ceremonies, and was rarely seen at official events. Even within NASA, his figure became scarce. For some, it was a logical decision to protect his family, to regain his privacy. For others, a reaction to the burden of fame. But more unsettling theories also emerged. Did he experience something on the moon that made him step back? An experience so overwhelming that he chose silence? Be that as it may, Armstrong remained firm in his distance. In 1971, just 2 years after the historic moon landing, he voluntarily resigned from NASA. He left the space program behind and returned to his native Ohio, where he accepted a position as an engineering professor. A simple life, far from noise and spotlights. It was hard to understand. The man who first walked on another world, living a modest, almost anonymous existence. Why? Some believe that, after reaching the peak of history, there was nothing left to achieve. Others think that what he witnessed on the moon marked him deeply. It has even been said that he may have received direct orders to remain silent about certain details of the moon landing. Was silence imposed on him, or did he choose it of his own free will? Throughout his life, Neil Armstrong never commented on theories, rumors, or alternative versions. He kept his own version of the story to himself. He lived simply, without luxury or scandal. And so the man who opened the door to the universe chose to walk the rest of his path in the deepest tranquility. What he truly saw up there perhaps went with him. Despite having achieved one of humanity's greatest feats, Neil Armstrong rarely spoke about the moon landing. Even with those closest to him, he avoided delving into the details. For him, what happened up there seemed too intimate, or perhaps too complex to explain with words. Over time, his marriage also began to deteriorate. Years after the historic journey, his wife decided to separate from him. And so, in his old age, the man who was cheered by millions lived in a solitude that deeply contrasted with his past glory. His increasingly reserved lifestyle raised many questions. What had the journey to the moon truly meant for Armstrong? According to close friends, he was never interested in the spotlight. He often said he was just an engineer doing his job, and that the success of Apollo 11 was the merit of a team of thousands of people, not of a single man. Advertising offers poured in after his return, but he accepted none. He rejected million-dollar contracts, avoided signing autographs, and even refrained from issuing checks for fear that his signature would become an object of speculation. On one occasion, a barber sold part of his hair to a collector. Upon finding out, Armstrong demanded that the money be donated to charity. Some saw him as naive, but those who truly knew him understood that he acted out of principle, not vanity. The years passed. Armstrong aged far from the noise, remaining true to his simple character. In August 2012, the world received sad news. Neil Armstrong had passed away at the age of 82 due to heart complications. It seemed like the definitive end of a great story, but it wasn't. Shortly after his death, a rumor emerged that shocked the world. A supposed letter written by Armstrong shortly before dying. According to the version that circulated, in that document he revealed experiences lived on the moon that were never officially reported. The content was astonishing, more like a science fiction novel than a technical report. Armstrong had allegedly recounted that during their lunar stay, Both he and Aldrin witnessed mysterious lights flying over the surface. They tried to communicate with NASA, but there was no response. When they opened the module's hatch, what they found left them paralyzed. Dozens of strange ships surrounded them. Some floated in the air, others rested on the ground. There were impossible shapes, discs, cones, triangles, even spheres the size of a baseball, all radiating colored lights. And then, according to the account, beings appeared. Some resembled humans. Others looked like hybrids between animals and machines. One approached Armstrong and extended a limb resembling a hand. He hesitated, but touched it. Instantly, an electric current ran through his body, and a voice manifested directly in his mind. "Do not be afraid. We will not harm you. We only want to communicate." These beings, the voice explained, were intergalactic explorers. They had been observing Earth for a long time, and now that humans had reached space, it was time to establish contact. Was this what really happened on the moon? Was that experience the cause of his retirement, his silence, his isolation? Was Armstrong witness to something our minds are not yet ready to comprehend? Neil Armstrong took many answers to the grave. What he truly experienced up there, we may never know. According to the story that came to light years later, the contact did not end with a simple greeting. Those beings, whatever they were, shared a message with Neil Armstrong. The universe, they said, is far from being a safe place. They spoke to him about dangers that exist beyond our understanding. Dark matter, dark energy, distortions in time and space, parallel universes, and life forms of all kinds, some benevolent, others deeply hostile. The warning was clear. If humanity wishes to explore the cosmos, it must do so wisely, strengthen its science, care for its planet, and above all, act with caution. After this message, the ships disappeared, without making the slightest sound. Decades later, in 2023, Armstrong's son, Mark, gave an interview that shook the world. In it, he revealed the existence of a letter written by his father shortly before dying. The document caused a global stir. Some took it as a shocking revelation. Others dismissed it as a fabricated story or even a joke. NASA, of course, strongly denied its authenticity. In that letter, Armstrong described in detail moments of the moon landing that had never been made public. As the Eagle module descended toward the lunar surface, he and Aldrin noticed something unusual. Several bright points moving quickly across the horizon. At first, they thought it was reflections or fragments from the spacecraft. But when they asked Houston, the response chilled them. The rocket debris was thousands of kilometers away. What they were seeing was not human. The most unsettling part came after the landing. As they prepared to exit, they observed several enormous ships on a nearby ridge. They were silent. They emitted no sound whatsoever. They floated, motionless, above the lunar surface. Their shape was completely different from any Earth technology. They shone with a metallic and cold glow. They were colossal, alien, inexplicable. Armstrong wrote in the letter, "It's too incredible. Clearly, we are not alone on the moon. Near us, there was something else. And they were watching us." At that moment, according to him, an indescribable sensation took hold of his body. A chill ran down his spine. His heart nearly stopped. He felt as if reality itself was breaking, and it was precisely then that the 2-minute interruption occurred, in the public transmission between the spacecraft and the control center on Earth. What happened in those 2 minutes, Armstrong wrote, was enough to completely change the way humanity sees the universe. According to him, they received a warning. They are not pleased with our arrival. Their technology is light years ahead of ours. We received a message. clear and firm. He did not mention who they were, but everything in the letter pointed to the same thing: a non-human intelligence. Was all this a real confession, a final delirium, or simply a story impossible to verify? The truth is, if what Armstrong wrote is real, then, by stepping on the moon, we were not the ones who discovered something new. We were the ones being discovered. When Armstrong and Aldrin saw the impossible on the lunar surface, Mission Control on Earth reacted immediately. They could not allow the world to hear what was happening. They ordered them to remain calm, follow protocol, and switch to a reserved communication frequency. Everything had to continue as if nothing were happening. The flag was planted, the photos were taken, and the samples were collected. But behind those rehearsed gestures, both astronauts carried a growing internal tension. They had witnessed something that completely escaped any human logic. In a letter that came to light decades later, Armstrong confessed that, after that historic landing, an enforced silence was imposed. Out of fear of global chaos, they were forbidden to speak about the flying objects that accompanied them on the moon. The global context was not ideal. The Cold War was at its peak, and any hint of extraterrestrial life could trigger an unprecedented crisis. Although NASA briefly continued with other lunar missions, the program was unexpectedly interrupted a few years later. According to Armstrong, the real reason was fear. Not of space, but of what was already there. What we saw changed us forever. Sometimes in dreams I return to that silent night on the moon, and above, motionless, those shapes watched us. I felt small, like an ant beneath the stars. That experience marked a before and after in his life. Over time, he began to question the place of the human being in the cosmos. He kept his thoughts to himself for years, until he decided to write them down. He wasn't seeking fame, but rather to awaken awareness. Perhaps, he said, the time has come to seriously ask ourselves, are we truly alone in this vast universe? And maybe, just maybe, what they found up there didn't want to be discovered yet. In 2012, after the death of Neil Armstrong, something unexpected came to light. A supposed letter written by the first man to walk on the moon. According to reports, it was his relatives or close acquaintances who decided to make it public, and what it revealed quickly shook the world. For years, Armstrong was seen as a reserved hero, an icon who never boasted. That's why the content of the letter surprised millions. Some couldn't believe he had kept such a secret for decades. Others, however, questioned its authenticity, wondering if it was just another rumor without evidence. The most unsettling part, NASA chose to say nothing. No confirmation. No denial. That silence only fueled the theories. Armstrong's words in that letter made many begin to look at the Apollo 11 mission with different eyes. Do we really know everything that happened on the moon? One of the most controversial points remains the exact moment when the live transmission was interrupted. For a few minutes, the world lost connection with the lunar module. The official explanation was technical, a simple signal failure or a bad camera angle. But some think differently. Conspiracy theorists claim that this lapse was used to censor an unexpected discovery, something that was not meant to be seen by the public. The most unsettling part came afterward. NASA declared that many of the original recordings of the moon landing were accidentally overwritten or poorly archived. High-quality footage simply disappeared. How is it possible that an event of such importance was not properly preserved? For many, the answer is clear. What was on those tapes was not suitable for the eyes of the world. Perhaps the question is not whether Armstrong wrote that letter, but why the silence weighs so heavily on that historic journey. And you, do you Believe we were told the whole truth about the moon. Not only have the technical secrets of the moon landing raised doubts, there is also another equally unsettling aspect: what happened to the astronauts after returning to Earth. Beyond Neil Armstrong, other members of the Apollo program experienced personal journeys marked by tragedy, emotional crises, and profound transformations. Buzz Aldrin, the second man to walk on the moon, couldn't bear the weight of fame. His life became entangled in depression and alcoholism. Pete Conrad, who led the Apollo 12 mission, died in a motorcycle accident. Alan Shepard, from Apollo 14, faced a serious illness in his final years, and many of them passed away earlier than expected. Edgar Mitchell went further. After his retirement, he confessed his firm belief in UFOs. He claimed that the U.S. government knew much more than it admitted. For his part, Eugene Cernan, the last human to walk on the lunar surface, declared that his experience up there changed him forever. Some of these men returned as different people, some traumatized, others turned toward spirituality or even mysticism. This succession of events has given rise to a disturbing theory, the moon curse. A controversial idea suggesting that those who have walked on the lunar surface do not return the same, that something up there touched them in an invisible way. Of course, it could be coincidence. Space is not an easy environment, and the physical and emotional toll is enormous. But with so many similar cases, is it so easy to ignore? Moreover, there's another unsettling detail. In several missions, astronauts reported strange phenomena near the moon, lights that shouldn't be there, moving objects they couldn't identify. During the Apollo 16 mission, for example, a camera captured an inexplicable bright spot on the lunar horizon. To this day, no one has been able to say with certainty what it was. So, is it possible that the simple act of walking on the moon left a deeper mark than we imagined? And what if what they found up there never truly let them return? During the Apollo 17 mission, strange conversations between the astronauts were recorded, loose phrases, comments that seemed to reflect confusion or surprise, as if they had seen something they couldn't fully comprehend. And they weren't the only ones. On the other side of the world, the Soviet Union also carried out its own lunar program. Although they didn't send humans, their robotic probes returned, with unsettling photographs, images of what some believe could be artificial structures. But the Soviets never commented on it. Absolute silence. What's curious is that these rumors don't contradict each other. On the contrary, they complement one another, as if something existed on the moon that neither the United States nor the USSR wanted to reveal. And there's more. In Apollo 12, NASA conducted an unexpected experiment. They deliberately dropped the lunar module's booster onto the surface. The result was as puzzling as it was fascinating. The moon vibrated for almost an hour, as if it were hollow. This fact, documented by the mission's own scientists, opened the door to even more radical theories. What if the moon isn't a natural satellite, but an artificial megastructure, a kind of ship, camouflaged? Of course, there's no solid evidence to support these ideas. But the real events, confirmed by NASA, continue to sow doubt. As if all this weren't enough, there are also those who distrust the very images of the moon landing. The reason? Details that don't add up. For example, in the official photographs, no stars are visible, and the American flag appears to wave, as if there were wind, evidence of a staged set. That's what some believe. Although in reality, everything has a scientific explanation. The cameras used very short exposure times, which prevented them from capturing the faint light of the stars. And the flag, which appears to move, does so, due to the impulse when the pole is planted. In the lunar vacuum, with no air to slow its movement, that effect lasts longer than normal. So, are we facing simple scientific misunderstandings, or are they distractions from a much greater mystery? Perhaps. The most unsettling thing is not what they show us, but everything they never told us. Over the years, many conspiracy theories have tried to cast doubt on one of humanity's greatest achievements, the arrival of man on the moon. However, scientists and the astronauts themselves have refuted these claims one by one. The evidence is clear. Fragments of lunar rocks brought back to Earth, laser experiments that still reflect signals from the lunar surface, and the direct testimony of those who were there. But despite all that evidence, there are still those who believe it was all a hoax. In 2002, Buzz Aldrin himself, the second man to walk on the moon, lost his patience. A denier confronted him, insulted him, and Aldrin knocked him down with a punch. It wasn't a diplomatic gesture, but it was a clear sign of how much it affects them that people doubt what they lived through. Now then, there's another detail that fuels the mystery. Why did NASA stopped the Apollo program right after the 17th mission? Originally, missions were planned up to Apollo 20, but after the success of Apollo 17 in 1972, everything was suddenly canceled. The official version speaks of budget cuts and a new focus on shuttles and space stations, but conspiracy theorists aren't convinced. According to them, something else happened. Something that made the United States stop sending humans to the moon for more than 5 decades. A warning? An uncomfortable discovery? It has even been said that the Apollo 18, 19, and 20 missions did exist but were kept secret, and that on the far side of the moon they found remnants of extraterrestrial technology, and even non-human bodies. There is no solid evidence. Only rumors, theories, and a lot of imagination. What is certain is that these stories have never stopped circulating. They have inspired books, documentaries, and films, keeping the mystery of the moon alive, because although the moon landing was real, the debate never faded. Despite the passage of time, the alleged moon landing hoax continues to fuel debates and theories, and when something captivates the collective imagination so deeply, it's hard to leave it behind. What really happened up there? Did Armstrong experience something he could never share, and that supposed letter he left before dying? Was it a sincere testimony or just an urban legend? The truth, as so often happens, dissolves between distorted memories and stories without proof. But if there's one constant, it's human curiosity. Since the historic Apollo 11, we haven't stopped. We've explored planets with probes, built space stations, and now, more than 50 years later, we're ready to return. The Artemis program promises to bring us back to the lunar surface, this time with a historic mission. The first female astronaut will walk on the moon, and not only the United States, China and other powers also want to be there. The new era of lunar exploration has begun, and when that new generation of explorers gazes at the lunar horizon, perhaps they will understand the silence Armstrong kept. On the 25th anniversary of the moon landing, Armstrong left a powerful phrase. Truth is often wrapped in layers. Only the brave uncover it. Whatever truth the moon hides, it remains there, high in the sky, watching. Armstrong's footprints are still marked on its surface, unaltered, silent, like guardians of a story that has not yet been fully told. And although the man who left them is no longer among us, those Footprints still speak to us. They invite us to return, to discover what is hidden on the most mysterious side of our satellite. And what if one day we discover that the truth is even more fascinating than the legends, that we are not alone, that there was always someone else watching from up there? The moon does not forget. It only waits for us to be ready.